As I said earlier, there are two approaches in the drawing. It can be linear and tonal. The line is connected with the silhouette and the designation of the form. It's a hint of the image. Tonality is already directly related to volume. It's about a realistic shape. This means that there are light-shadow relations in the tonal drawing. In the linear drawing, only the shape is present. Let's look at this in a simple example. If I want to draw a cube, there will be a linear drawing in this variation of its image. You can sign it. If I want to make the shape voluminous, then I will have to fill it with shadows, semitones, and light. I think you can see a big difference between these two drawings. The second drawing is voluminous, and the first one only conveys the silhouette. It only hints at the shape, while the tone patterns exactly indicates what kind of object it is. You can, for example, draw such minimalistic portraits, and it can be done only with a line. And the tonal pattern is when we add shadows, light, and so on to the same person. Next, we will look at what approaches exist in the graphics. In total, we also have two of them. This is hatching and shading. In this case, the stroke is considered more as an academic version of working with a drawing. Hatching is a very precise and measured technique. In the shading, we shade everything with our fingers, and there is no accuracy. The whole drawing resembles a soft cloud or an object that manifests itself in space. Working with a stroke, we can also come to a similar effect. But for this, you need to be a real professional and have a lot of experience. There are much more subtleties and difficulties in working with a stroke than when working with a shading, since a straight line is very important in a stroke. That's why we started with simple exercises, and now we will gradually learn how to transform a line into a tangible form. Now I will show you what the difference is. A stroke is essentially just a set of straight lines. Note that here each line is parallel to the other. Of course, it's wrong to make your lines rounder. This is a mistake. Hatching in different directions is also considered incorrect. The essence of the stroke is that the distance between the lines is the same or almost as its height. All other approaches will be more like an experimental, free technique and will have nothing to do with academicism. Throughout the course, we will consider not only academic technique, but also more free and independent ones. I will show in which case it's better to use a stroke and in which a shading or other technique. We will have a certain mixture of different approaches on the course, which are most often used in graphic works. If you want to enter to the Academy of Fine Arts, you will certainly be asked to show your ability to work with a stroke than any other technique. When it comes to finding style, creative search, and so on, knowledge of working with a shading is better for you. At least we focus on these two techniques as they are the most important. Now we have seen what the hatching looks like. And now let's look at the shading. It's better for it to take soft pencils like 2B. Shading is when you create a solid spot. Note that to achieve a similar effect, the pencil should be held at an angle, not straight. You should work with the plane of the pencil, not with its tip. The shading is similar to a soft feeling of the form. There are no straight lines in it. They should not be visible. Of course, for a common base, you need to know at least these two techniques and be able to work with them. Now we will delve into the study of hatching. To begin with, we will learn how the softness of the pencil visually differs. I will first take a pencil H and try to shade a small place with it. It's light enough, you can sign it at the bottom. Here, you should not put pressure on the pencil, its natural softness should manifest itself on its own, without effort. If you need a dark line, take a 5B pencil for example. I will taking HB now, and I do the same. You will notice that each time the intensity of the tone will change. Then I take B. Pay attention, it's already darker than before. Then to B, even darker. Again, I don't put pressure on the pencil. Therefore, when working with shadows, we usually take softer pencils, and when working with light, harder ones. Next, I take the rest of the pencils as 4 and 5B and I finish with 7B. Let me remind you once again that in the process of drawing, I never pressed on the pencil. Now, looking at our scale with softness, you can see the difference of all pencils. Here, you can select a group of 4 pencils. I talked about it earlier. These are HB, B, 2B, and 4B. If your goal is to create very dark tone works, I would also advise you to take softer pencils than those listed above. And now, let's move on to the analysis of the rules related to the stroke. Let's analyze the basic rules of a successful stroke. First and most important, your pencil should be perfectly sharp. If it has a blunt end, then it will not allow you to create a clear and neat line. Such moment can really ruin the work. So, let's move on to the other rules. The stroke can be of different width and span. Usually, everyone chooses it for themselves. There are those who stroke very widely, like this. Others do it more subtle. There are also those who do something in between. It's very individual. You need to do it the way you feel comfortable. Usually, it depends on a person's temperament, so there is no exact rule in this case. But you personally should have one stroke scope. Since we work with a classic pattern, we can't apply strokes of different lengths side by side like this. The width and the length of your line should be identical everywhere, because we will need to fill the entire drawing with such small strokes, and if you change the size too often, it will negatively influence on the visual effect. That is, if you divide your stroke into many different parts, you will see that they are identical if you did everything correctly. Of course, there is no need to be millimeter by millimeter, like there is no need to measure anything with a ruler. Just visually, it should look like a single stroke. The main thing, I repeat, try to avoid a very noticeable difference in size, as this will go against all the main rules of the classic drawing. Also, your stroke should be light. Having determined the stroke height, we begin to work with the line density. Again, feel which movement of arm swing is more comfortable for you. Both the stroke height and its saturation will depend on this. Let's go back to the main arrows. It's important not to make your line arcuate and so chaotically located. I remind you that all the lines in the stroke are parallel to each other. The next is this. The distance of all these segments is the same. It's not right to do this. Having decided on the scope of the stroke, the next task is to apply the tone. We do not need to put pressure on the pencil again and draw so darkly to darken this or that place in the drawing. Not at all. All you need is to put a stroke on a stroke to darken the necessary place. To apply the second layer, it's important to slightly change the angle of the stroke. And then you apply the second layer using the same width and height of the stroke as at the very beginning. I repeat, it's a gross mistake to do otherwise. Now we have made 2 overlays. You can also do 3 or even more, there is no limit. Now I'm drawing with the pencil HB. If you need to work with shadows, it's better to take a density of 2B or more. But let me remind you that we never start drawing with very soft pencils, even if we want a lot of shadows. We always lay the basic tone of the drawing with HB or B pencils. In no case should you change the direction of your line so abruptly, since the result is a kind of grid which is not visually beautiful. This can greatly disrupt the perception of the form. For example, you draw an apple and a porcelain vase. It should be soft and smooth, and the grid will add rudeness to these objects and completely destroy its perception. All subsequent stroke or overlays should change its angle very gradually, literally by a few degrees. Practice a few times to learn this point. It's also not recommended to leave the same stroke angle with each application. Visually, this will not make sense. It's extremely important to change the angle to darken the spot, remember this. Here, for example, I used about 5 layers, and this place has already darkened. At the same time, I did not put pressure on the pencil and all the layers of the H overlay. Now we will learn how to make transitions correctly and connect the strokes with each other. Most often, you have some part of the sheet, and you may want to shade it like this. But this does not mean that you will need to fill it out with one sweep of your hand. Ideally, you need to carefully fill out this or that form with help of your usual stroke. We never increase the stroke if the place where we want to apply it's too wide. We are just adapting it to fit the place. For example, we still start drawing a cube with U. It has wide enough edges. We will depict it on an A4 sheet. Therefore, we will not be able to fill one face with a single stroke. We will fill in this line in our comfortable rhythm and the span of the stroke. Most often, we will connect our strokes everywhere. There are some small rules here. The first is to connect your strokes so that there is no visible transition between them. If you touch the edge of the previous layer, you will create a double overlay, which will visually look like a dark spot. The second rule is to not move much layers from other layers. And third, you need to create a smooth connection. But you don't need one line to flow into another. When connecting the upper and lower layers, it's important for you to start hatching from the place when the lower layer ended. At the same time, do not enter it. You start right above it, while trying not to go in. I will show it on my hands. We need to connect our strokes like this, but not like this. There should be a smooth docking. I repeat, there is no need to create a continuation for the previous lines. It's just important not to create overlays. Ideally, do it like this. As a result, it should be a single spot. You don't have to clearly see where one stroke starts and where the other ends. These are all the basic rules that need to be filled out.